presence of God. As we commence our meeting, let us together pray for guidance and help. Almighty God, we ask your blessings on this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the true welfare of Australia and the people of Yass Valley. Amen. Thank you. We have no apologies. All councillors are here. Do we have any declarations of interest? Cecil Burgess?
7.1. I was a trustee of the committee, but I'm not
in 7.1.
Yeah, 7.1. That's all. I won't be in the room.
No. All right. Councillor Turner.
Yes, Madam Mayor. 5.1, I am potentially in the corridor. One of the corridors is being considered for the 500 kV line, and as such, if it happens, when it happens, and there is compensation, I will either be financially advantaged or I will be disadvantaged by the devaluation of my property. Non-significant, non-pecuniary, I shall be staying put.
I'd just like to point out I will be staying for 6.1. I would like to acknowledge that I am in a working group with Rebecca Duncan, but I consider it non-pecuniary and insignificant. Thank you.
I also just have one that I will, 7.1. It's non-pecuniary and it's less than significant, but I will actually leave the room just in abundance of portion. There is a portion of the road resealing that is proposed in that program that goes near my property. So I shall leave the room and let you all discuss it like you. Councillor McManus.
5.1, the Mayor of Minute. I'm an employee of electricity, the old electricity commission, which is now Transgrid, and I will be actively working on that job. So I will be. It's a non-pecuniary but significant, so I'll be abstaining from.
Thank you. Okay, no others. I'll move to the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting on the 24th of June. If I could have a mover and seconder. So I move Councillor Turner, Councillor Burgess. Thank you very much. All those in favour, unless there's any changes. Thank you. All those in favour, that's everyone. If there are any other additional items arising out of those minutes. So we'll move to the Mayoral Minute, and I'll ask Councillor McManus is going to remove himself from the room. Thank you. As you can see from the Mayoral Minute, we did have a brief update from Transgrid some little while ago. I'm not sure too many councils actually were available for that update. At the time, and they have been discussing it for some time, there were 2 or 3 paths that they have been looking as part of the Snowy Hydro, upgrading the lines down to Wagga. And my understanding is now that they have actually more or less chosen the path, and we think it's appropriate that they actually come and advise council of what path they're taking, because it will affect some of our ratepayers, and I think it's another way of actually getting that information to them as well. So that's essentially what the Mayoral Minute's about, is requesting them to come and give us a briefing and an update. So moved. Councillor Ferry, thank you. Councillor Harker, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Would you like to just grab Councillor McManus? Thank you. So if we could move to the Director of Planning reports. Only one for the first. And I was going to say apologies. I need to actually welcome our new Director of Planning. She's been here 3 weeks. It's like she's been here forever. Anyway, so for those who haven't met, this is our new Director of Planning, Julie, and you will no doubt see much more of her over the coming months and years, hopefully, as she settles in. Julie's in the process of renting here and relocating her family here. So we welcome you formally to Yass. Thank you. Very happy to be here. Okay, so moving to your report, which is item 6.1, Local Heritage Grant Program. We obviously have a recommendation in front of us. Need someone to. Councillor Frost is going to move it as it stands. Councillor, do I have a seconder at this point? Seconder, we can't debate it. Councillor Turner, thank you. Just for debate. Councillor Jones, question.
Sorry, I went searching for the policy just while we were listening to the submitter earlier, and I realised that the policy as it stands online is put in as draft. Is there any other policy that we should be referring to? Because the heritage policy that we have up online is draft. Is there anything else other than that?
That's
Is that just an error in not putting up or removing the word draft off it?
it's quite possible that
Okay.
there's two parts of the site where the policy is,
Okay.
and in one policy it will be right, and if we didn't do the other link,
Yep.
it'll still have the sort of the draft version of it. We can fix that up.
Okay, so
and
that,
sort
I just
out.
wanted to make sure I'm
Yes.
referring to the right one.
Yeah.
So I couldn't see anything which indicates that discussing it with the heritage advisor is part of the policy,
No.
and the applicant said it's also not on the.
There's two things you need to consider is the policy, which provides the framework, but there's also an application form as well that goes with it. And on the application form, I think it's got some checklist that indicates have you got your quote, have you talked with the heritage advisor, and the answer, so it's a yes or not applicable. And I think in this particular application for the Orient Street one, it was ticked as not applicable. Look, certainly our heritage advisor, we strongly encourage anybody making a grant under this program to talk to the heritage advisor, and that's one of the things that we take into account. That means that the heritage advisor can apply their expert advice to the particular applications and the like. But like a lot of our grant programs, we tend to get more applications than we have money available, and certainly the assessment panel, I'm sure Councillor Frost will be able to advise that they're looking for which are the most meritorious applications, and with the available budget that they have to allocate.
Could I suggest an amendment to the motion then?
To the motion first.
So yours was a question. So
Yes,
you
yes,
can speak to the
absolutely.
motion, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I was the councillor on this list. I would hope that there might be more councillors, but apparently we're only allowed one. I think Councillor Turner would have volunteered to have been there, because I think it'd be much more useful if we could have two or maybe three or maybe as many councillors who are interested to go and do that, so that we don't end up discussing individual items here, that we actually do them where the assessment is. However, this was a particularly efficient process. The applications closed on Friday. By about 5 o'clock Friday, I had every application, and the meeting was set for Monday. So there wasn't a lot of time for people to do other than assess what was in front of us, and that's okay. We had something like $19,000 to allocate. We had applications for something a lot more than that. I didn't have to actually coming up with probably about $30,000 worth, and they were good applications, or good projects. They were all good projects. But given the situation that we're under, we really had to go on the applications that were applied. And on the applications, we ended up with this, and every one of those ones that you have there is worthy. And I would think there's the note about 46 Orion Street indicated that as a committee we also recognise that this has a very high heritage value, but the application was very scant in details, and that's and the option was, if there is any money we could do there, then the heritage advisor would have the ability to go and build on that application
As long as he was reasonably satisfied with what was going on, we were happy for that money to be allocated. But on a very scant application, wasn't, and given the competition around, we decided on this. Now, I would very much like to have an extra amount of money that we, and this council may decide, an extra amount of money to go to help that application be fine. Even that one photo that wasn't in the application of that corner falling away, because the only photo we had was of some cracks in the wall, and that really didn't tell us much. We had the only description of the work to be done was by the person who was undertaking to do it, and so we had there was no independent, no technical information, nothing that we could actually work on. Now, I suspect, and everybody else, we all thought it was very likely an absolutely excellent project, and knowing the people, yes, we're pretty sure that that would be the case. But on the basis of the applications, this is the recommendation you get. As I say, I'm quite happy for this to be amended, particularly if we had an extra couple of $1,000 that could go to this project, because I think this project will be an excellent one, especially if we sort of confirm it by having the heritage advisor just do an inspection, because there are a couple of ways to undertake that work. And this is technically, there are a couple of different ways to do that sort of underpinning, and he didn't really understand which one it was and whether or not that was an appropriate one. So it revolved around technical stuff. It didn't revolve around anything other than that, and the way the application was done. As I say, very happy for it to go. And if somebody were to move that there were extra funds allocated, I would be very pleased to support it.
Madam Mayor, just to mention, if you're going to do that, we need to identify where the money's coming from.
Yeah. You would also have to identify what other projects didn't get up and how that compared with everybody else as well. So, yes.
No, my amendment doesn't relate to allocating funding, but I was going to suggest either as a note to go forward for staff or as an amendment, that discussion with the heritage advisor be added as a scoreable item in the matrix in our communication on the application form. Because if it's considered as not, or it's not clear that it will put you up or down in the scoreable matrix, then I think we need to communicate that fully.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I might.
Yes, Councillor Reid.
Apologies for not being able to come to the meeting tonight. I'm in isolation at the moment. Seriously. My question was that, well, it's twofold. One is that over the last 2 years now, we've allocated 3/4 of the funds to Vine Along. So I was wondering whether there's any particular reason for that. And I also understand the issues of running these committees the way they are. But this one, the Orion Street one, was the only one that we rejected. And I was wondering whether or not consideration had been given to reducing some of the other amounts that were handed out and funding at least partially that particular project. Sorry, that question was aimed towards Councillor Fox.
Just for clarification, there were three that actually didn't come up. Councillor Reid, wasn't just the one. Madam Mayor, when we had this, when we send the checks out, do we do it at completion of work, or do we do it at the start of the program?
I have to take that on notice. My understanding was
the reason I asked the question is that I don't want to create a false sense of anticipation that there's going to be $4,000 available, when in fact that's not the way funding process works. So can we just, if you don't mind,
I can certainly follow that up. But my understanding is that the again, with a lot of building projects, they're done by progress payments. So the normal way would be, once the work is completed, then they claim the grant funding as part of the work. Yeah. There's certainly in recent years, councillors, we've had a number of projects where we've awarded grants that, for whatever reason, did not proceed, and we have had a priority list of applicants that weren't in the first tranche, if you like, of approvals. where we've taken from that priority list and added them as a replacement project. So there's certainly the way the recommendation is presented is that if any of those projects that have been successful do not proceed for whatever reason, then the Orion Street, subject to some clarification, would potentially come forward as a replacement project.
And that could be in arrears as well. So it wouldn't be dependent on them not commencing. For the purpose of this, it could possibly be in arrears.
I'm not aware that we've done it in arrears in the past.
We do understand the logic, because I would hate to think that the applicant is missed out at this point would delay 12 months in the hope of receiving funding, whereas if they go and fix the problem and the money becomes available, they can claim in arrears.
Certainly,
otherwise they're going to sit there for 12 months in the hope of getting some money, whereas I'm suggesting that if we actually consider that in the wording of the third dot point, that they could claim in arrears if it becomes available. Otherwise the building will just won't get done. Like you're creating a false sense of optimism.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Look, I suppose I really have empathy for the applicant when you do take on a heritage building. We all know that comes with challenges, and I think we'd all like a way to support them in any way we can. But I do like Councillor McManus's option of and general managers of putting them on a priority list. If we have no ability to get any extra funds, I think they're asking for 1,600. If we had it, if we allocate it, but at this stage we don't have it. So my question is, the next option for these applicants is one, potentially go on the priority list if one doesn't go ahead, or they look for next year's grant. So this is an annual grant program.
Certainly that's what's happened with some people in the past. If they've missed out 1 year and they haven't become on the priority list, they've applied again. We have had that in the past. Again, every year it depends on who makes applications. Yeah. So even though they missed out this year, they may still be a low priority next year, depending on what applications come forward. So I can understand if somebody is waiting on moving up the priority list and holding off doing the work. I can understand that doesn't deliver the heritage restoration that the owners are after. So
no guarantee.
So that's right.
Yeah. And just to, I suppose, build on what Councillor McManus said in terms of if they were a priority list, they did proceed with the work and then they were accepted. I mean, that's a risk they take, but whether that is an option for them.
Well, that certainly would be, because if all of their projects that have been awarded money go ahead, and there is, and they might be the first priority, but if there's no available funding, they will be taking that risk.
Yeah. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just have one final question, and it could be answered by Councillor Frost. I'm not sure, but are all of these prices awarded the maximum that they can receive based on based on the amount that the project is for? And what would it do to skim 500 off the top ones? Would that mean that these other projects couldn't proceed to the, to actually achieve the result? Yeah.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the second part of the question, I've got no idea. To ask the applicants about whether or not
I don't know anything
proceed or not, regardless of the thing. Not all those. Some of those amounts are less than the amounts asked for.
Yes.
Not by a huge amount, simply because I think we came to something like 21 or 2,000 with those projects if you pay them all, and then we, as you suggested, reduced it down so that we ended up with 19. It's not a, and some of those are very big projects. Our contribution is relatively small in that, but our support through this is probably very important in going on, particularly on thing one. That funding, if it's not going forward, then there will be a hole. I like council. Just can't think of what the wording would look like. I like the concept. I was trying to think what the wording would look like, but I would like to work on that so that they can complete the work, and as long as at the end of the year the fund's over, they can be represented.
They are having the reasons.
Can I just for a bit of clarity here for a moment, we've actually got a recommendation in front of us. We've got an amendment of some description sort of underneath it. And the mover and seconder, we added in the event that, no, that's actually already in there. Maximum 4,000 be provided to Orange Street. That's actually what they're asking for, was 4,000, was it?
Yeah, that recommendation is
or
up to.
some up to, okay. So first of all, I want to just clarify, there's some suggested wording for an amendment in there about the heritage advisor be added to the item on the matrix.
And we should put the on the
First of all, I've got to ask
Yeah.
if these guys actually, the movers and seconder, which is Councillor Frost and Councillor Turner, whether you're prepared to accept that and if we think that's necessary. So we can just actually clarify what the actual resolution is.
Could I just comment first? No, I'm not sure yet whether or not, because I'd like the councillors to understand the problem. In part, if you ask the heritage advisor, look at the applications, either he's got to go around to try and get everyone, and that means that before anybody applies, they've got to have contacted him, which means an awful lot of work for him in that sense. Or we need to just defer the process a little bit to give him a chance to have a look at each of these projects between when they close, when they close, and when the assessment's made. I would think the latter is the better way of doing it, but it does mean a delay in terms of the decision-making process. So we wouldn't be considering it this meeting, we would be considering it at the next meeting.
Okay, so for clarification.
So that's the difference. I do think the advantage of having, I think it's a very, very positive thing to have the heritage advisor look at each one of these projects.
Just for a point of clarity though, but when people are applying for this, they do not have to have conversation with the heritage advisor. So why are we adding it in now? If that's a determining factor, and I think the answer to that was it isn't a determining factor. So why would we add it in? That I've got hands going everywhere. Right, Alison, Nathan, Turner, Furry. Councillor Furry, you get the first honours.
I was concerned my name's been hyphenated again. Madam Mayor, I just wanted to, first off, if a decision isn't made between the mover and seconder, I'm happy to second this. I think that we need to give some sort of clarity to the people applying in the process. If they're aware that the heritage advisor is being added as an item on the matrix, I think it's important from a quality assurance perspective for applications, particularly around, I won't mention the particular application, but I'm sure we can all read between the lines, particularly with that applicant, that if they were to be able to see quite clearly that it was added in the process, go through that process, we then have an extra set of eyes that can help provide that quality assurance on the application. And I think we heard in open forum that this was a massive point of confusion for that applicant. So I think we need to give some form of clarity, and that's why I definitely commend that amendment, and I'd be happy to second it if a decision's not made.
So what you're saying is you want to amend the policy to include this in there? Is in reality, that's what you're actually saying?
As per the amendment, I think that it's important.
It's either the application or the policy, whichever one, because one refers to the other, but ideally you would put it on the application if it's a determining factor and it's stated in here as footnotes to us, or with any discussion with the heritage advisor. So it's of importance to council staff to tell us that they didn't seek that advice, and it's been given as one of the reasons as to the three that didn't get up, but this one is the next. It's the next one that gets sucked up into the system. So I think with the advice of a heritage advisor, this could have been clearly in the mix tonight. So let's add it to the application. But I think we need to clarify that it's on the application. Included on the
Through Madam Mayor, I'll just make this minor suggestion. I think it should be discussion with the heritage advisor be included in the selection criteria as a matter for consideration in determining funding. As a matter for consideration in determining funding.
Okay. Are the mover and seconder happy to include that in the process as item 4 of their?
I'm happy.
provided it fits into the timeframe. Like this, I read Councillor Frost's point.
All right, now, does anyone wish to speak for or against the Councillor Turner?
I just have a question, Madam Mayor. In the matrix, with reference to Councillor McManus, it says, is the application for retrospective financing yes or no? If yes, the project is not eligible. In order to implement his suggestion, which I think has merit, we need to have a modification somewhere in that policy.
Modification to the,
At the time of the application, the project hasn't commenced, and it certainly hasn't commenced tonight. All I was asking before, is it possible, without raising expectations, but for the next 12 months, if they complete the work, they'd be eligible to be paid in arrears. I actually don't think there's going to be any money, because I think the process, that's the problem. The process will be, yes, you've got $4,000. They'll go and spend 12. At the end of the spend of the 12, they'll turn up to council and say, can I be reimbursed by 4? It's the only way that there'll be money left over is that someone doesn't do the project, and every one of these projects will go ahead. So,
If you want,
but they're all in retrospective, if we talked about it before, sorry to interrupt, but they claim after they've done the project.
yeah.
Anyway,
and
so that's the same for everyone.
it was approval first.
Yeah.
Because this stage, that one's in limbo before.
can I perhaps help you out? If you just added into the selection criteria the Heritage Advisor's comments in respect to it, there's no reason why you couldn't add something further to that that suggested that in exceptional circumstances, payment in arrears may be considered for priorities not awarded in the first round or something like that.
Either that, or you can simply add it to that point 3 and just say for any work that occurred in this financial year.
I was just thinking more broadly rather than this specific application. It was more
In the future.
in the
Just
future.
trying to
Yeah.
cover the same problem coming up next year.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that was included is because we want a full $19,000.
So did you want to close, or that's your close? No, Councillor Ferry wants to speak.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to note a word of caution, and I know that this happens every time we seem to talk about a grant process or anything related to that, is that we always risk the danger of sounding like, especially now that we're live streaming, of making policy on the run, which is certainly not what we're trying to do. But this just re-emphasises the importance of the need for a workshop process and workshopping with our staff to, one, ensure that we have the best understanding of the processes we have in place, but two, when there's potential to reform or improve those processes, that we take the opportunity to do that and then bring it forward. I just wanted to exercise that as a word of caution.
Yep, we tend to change things on the run constantly. And we have about 40 workshops booked in already, as far as I can tell, so we must be able to tack it onto something else.
If you wanted to do that, you could actually say that that a council workshop be held to discuss these two.
I think
two
we
items.
can take that as read. I don't think it needs to be in the motion. Word of caution. Yeah, word of caution is all good.
Just before we close, could I
Yes,
say
Councillor.
something? Yeah, I'm just wondering whether or not it's possible to, excuse me, is it possible to get additional funding, especially in view of what's available at the moment? In other words, we seem to be getting a lot of these, quite a lot of these requested grants, and they're not that much more than what we've got in the bucket. But so if we could improve the bucket by 50%, we might be able to resolve more of them.
Taking that into account, the problem we have, if you've got to pull it out of another bucket because the bucket's the same size.
Sorry, I didn't mean from us. I meant from getting a grant from New South Wales Heritage or something like that.
Okay.
Through Madam Mayor, this is a funding formula at 2 to 1. So for every $1 that we put forward, the state gives $2. That's been in place now for many years. And and again, the bucket at the state level shrinks every year as well. So the difficulty is, well, you could certainly advocate for increased funding, but it'll go into the state melting pot for juggling their priorities as well. But you know, you can try, but it hasn't changed in the last 20 years in terms of the funding formula.
Thank you.
All right. Close the debate. I think we've discussed that sufficiently. I'm going to put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Moving to the next item, 7.1. I'll hand over to the Deputy Mayor. You've got a phone to go and play with.
Trying to borrow one.
It's going to take 25 minutes. Hopefully not long.
Councillors, thank you. We'll now move to item 7.1, fixing local roads program. You have a recommendation in front of you. Councillor McManus, you have the call.
Slightly different recommendation. Dot point 1 stays the same. Dot point 2, the priority ceiling program be revised by substituting section 3, the Black Range Road, Yass, or section 1, Shingle Hill Way, and then 3, 4, 5 and 6 would continue as they are.
Okay, Councillor McManus, you're moving that recommendation. I'll give councillors an opportunity to read that recommendation very briefly.
So
It might help if you speak to it before we
Yes.
obtain a second up.
So I've added dot point 2, which is unfortunately, well, fortunately, councils across Australia have been given extra funding for local roads. We've had a priority listing, and we've now got a windfall of money. Unfortunately, there's a section of road there, the Black Range Road, which would impact on the Mayor's road, virtually in front of her house. And I don't think it's appropriate we spend that money on that piece of road when there's another opportunity to move the same amount of money out to Shingle Hill Way. Sometimes councillors have to take one for the team, and I think this is one of those times where, unfortunately, there are other users of the Black Range Road, but I think it would be a very bad look on council if we were to spend this windfall money on that section of the Mayor's Road. So I'm asking that we just slightly adjust it and we spend the money on Shingle Hill Way, which has to be done anyway.
Thank you, Councillor McManus. Is there a second up for this recommendation that Councillor McManus has moved?
I have a question first.
Councillor Jones, I'll allow. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see Shingle Hill Way in this document at all in terms of priority. So I'd like to know how that has come into your line of sight.
Because it's the next one on the list.
Sorry?
Are you?
So Councillor Jones has asked a question. I'll allow Councillor McManus to answer that question. Go ahead, Councillor.
So that's correct, because the list you've got there is the finite list, not the list, the next list. So that list is 1 to 99. There's 99 to 1,000. There's 99 to 1,000 that's not there. We can certainly go and bring them all in.
No.
But as most councils are aware, that we've got a list, we have an enormously long list. We've grabbed the first 99. I've just gone to the next one.
So I understand our General Manager probably wants to talk to this briefly. Councillor Jones, are you happy to second that recommendation, or are you?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, second, Councillor Jones.
Just a point of clarification, we did actually in a recent council meeting allocate some other grant money that we received to realign part of Shingle Hill Way and a creek crossing. This segment for Shingle Hill Way would match in with that work we're using for other money that grant money that we've received.
We usually have so many projects and so little money. I'm used to seeing everything there and the list of that don't get it on the same page. So I do apologise.
Councillor Frost,
I'm now up to speed.
It tidies up all that.
Sorry, if no one's speaking at the moment. Councillor Frost, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm going to oppose this motion, and I'll foreshadow the original motion. The only reason the Shingle Hill, I'm sure it's needed, like so many are. The criteria that we've used to develop this original list said that the area on Black Range needed it more. Incrementally, yeah. The only reason we're changing it is because the mayor lives there. Now, the reason that we go through all of this stuff with people going out of rooms and doing all of that sort of stuff is because we don't want our decisions biased by where people live and who they are, and that's what we do it for. And here we are saying, oh, we're going to make ourselves really clever by changing the decision because the mayor happens to live there. So all of those people on the other side of the mayor on Black Range Road, they all miss out on the basis that the mayor's there and, oh, we couldn't look like we might do that because, in other words, the whole point of this stuff is to make sure that we make fair and sensible decisions, and we're going out of our way here to make an unfair and not sensible decision. In other words, sending the money to somewhere of lesser priority when we know that there was a higher priority. And to me, that's a silly thing to do. Yes, there'll be people who whisper about the mayor getting funds, but it's not. We know that's not true. And in fact, it's on the other side of the mayor. So the mayor's the other side of where the mayor lives compared with town. So that the benefit to her is probably zero anyway. But in any case, no matter where it was, if the criteria here say that's where the money ought to spend, we should have the spine to stand up and say that's where the money ought to be spent. And so that's why I will be voting against this, and I will be putting the original motion, which is based on the evidence.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillor Turner.
Yes, I must say, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd have to support Councillor Frost in this. It's a damned if you do and damned if you don't. But it is grossly unfair to the other people who live on that road to be penalised merely because the mayor happens to live on it. It was prioritised by the engineer as being in the priority list. It's a road that is used by school buses, it's used by people going to their work, it's used by people in emergencies. It is a section of road that has deteriorated as a result of that traffic, and it requires repair. The fact that it is down the road from the mayor is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. We cannot penalise ratepayers simply because they live on the wrong side of a mayor or a councillor. It is absolute nonsense, and I certainly will be with Councillor Frost voting against the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I suppose I had the same concern in terms of, I just want to clarify, this road actually isn't even in front of the mayor's house. It is the road going to the next part. And I suppose I was also conscious that we may be penalising the ratepayers living on that road in the, in the attempt to do the right thing by the community. I think the sentiment is nice, but I think that's our point here, is to apply common sense. We all live or know relatives on one of these roads, and they were prioritised for a reason. And the Black Range Road is sort of middle of the list, so we would be prioritising a 20 plus further down the list over this, to in consideration of the residential abode. Yeah, so I suppose I just want to clarify, it definitely is on the other side of the residency, so then probably actually has no impact on or benefit to the mayor.
I'll defer that question to staff.
Sure. Segment 3, I think, is about 3 kilometres up the road. Is that right?
Yes.
So they're about each segment's a kilometre of road. Yep. So the start of the road would be Yass Valley Way, and then the 3rd kilometre of the road. And I can't recall whether the mayor's driveway is just before, just after, or
yeah. But it's based on the segmentation.
It's based on each segment's a kilometre, yeah. Roughly. And
the status of the actual deterioration on that segment.
Yeah, that's right. These aren't in actual sort of priority order. They're just in sort of number order, which allocates. The roads all have a number. So and then they've got a segment next to them. So that's it was just the Black Range Road is.
It could have been number 1 or it could have been number 99.
It could be one or the end, but it's just it was in the priorities.
Okay, and the Shingle Way that was mentioned, who did that that for, is that next on the,
Yeah, my understanding is if there were 99 priorities at this stage, it was the 100th
okay,
priority. But usually what happens with these, with the asset management register is that you might get a group of roads that are all equally weighted for the same priority. As I said, Shingle Hill Way was the next priority. We took Black Range off, but it also made sense in the fact that it was also, we were also doing other work in that area as well. So while there might be other roads that are also of equal level of deterioration, the fact that we're already there means that we could extend the project and make it cover the 2 grant allocations.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harker. I'm going to go to Councillor Burgess, and then I noticed that Councillor Turner has had his hand up. Are you still intending?
It was merely a matter of clarification.
Okay, no worries. We'll get to that in a second. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Burgess, you have the floor.
I'd just like a question asked, when they build a new bridge on Shingle Hill Way, isn't the money to reline the road, isn't the money there for that? Is the money there to redesign the road and seal all that road?
There's a section of road to realign the crossing, but also to then, because it's a realigned crossing, then we've got to match the road, the approaches, both sides. So the extent of the project is the crossing and the approaches, realigning them. If Shingle Hill Way was added, there'd be a further segment of the road over beyond that project.
So Councillor Turner, sorry.
I agree with Councillor Force. If the mayor lives on the road, so what? What about all the other poor people down there? The road needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Turner and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just for clarification, I actually drove down that road, and assuming that we're talking about approximately 1 kilometre, the deterioration of that road commences at the rear gate of the mayor's property. It is opposite the entrance to McGrath, where the school bus comes out, and from there through almost to David Major and Urard.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. That's appreciated. Councillor Jones.
Look, I'm still going to be in favour of Shingle Hill Way, and I'll tell you why. It's because of my councillor, I've received more calls about Shingle Hill Way than I have about Black Range Road. So my gut instinct is that this is an acceptable substitute. And if this list is not in a priority, I'm very comfortable with this exchange. And I'd like to read to you an email from our mayor talking about Shingle Hill Way, where she says, Shingle Way is classified as a regional road and as such is a significant road as a connector east-west as part of our region. So the mayor herself understands that this is a road that is also worthy. I think it's a very difficult decision to make. I understand that we should be showing no fear or favour, but given this list is not prioritised in the way that I think we all assumed it was, top to bottom, this is the greatest need. It certainly speaks to our need as councillors to get our heads around the road priority a bit better. And in the short amount of time that we've had to exchange with staff as to how these roads are even classified to get our heads around this list, I think we could all be in agreement that if there are 100 roads that need doing, in terms of the safety of our residents, every single one of them is important. And if it's not on this list this year, perhaps next. But certainly Shingle Hill Way, I have no problem exchanging that as a worthy substitute.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Noting that every other councillor's had an opportunity to speak. Councillor Reid, I see your face on that screen. Is there anything you'd like to add? I thought I'd just be inclusive.
No, I'm quite happy with the discussion so far. I believe that if the engineers tell us that the road past the mayor's residents need fixing, then I believe we should fix it.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Speaking from the chair for a moment, I think regardless of whichever way this vote goes, it's a good demonstration that councillors have been open and transparent and followed that all the way through. Councillor McManus, is there anything you'd want to say in closing?
This was the effort I made here was to save council embarrassment in that we've got a windfall from the federal government, and our immediate response is to spend it. And as it happens, it ends up being spent on the Mayor's Road. It's a particularly bad look. For the sake of a slight amendment, we can then tidy up Shingle Hill Way, which we've spent close to $1 million on under grant funding, 1.2,
No, I think it was more than that. I think it's closer to two.
and this would actually allow us to tidy up and complete that section of Shingle Hill Way. And in saying that, Black Range hasn't been a neglected road. We just spent $1 million on a bridge out there, straightening up a bad corner, and this was the intent was purely to save council the embarrassment of spending the windfall money on the Mayor's Road. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor McManus. Councillor McManus speaking has closed the debate, so I'll now put the recommendation that is before you. All those in favour? Okay. So Councillors McManus, Councillor Jones, Councillor Ferry, all those against? Councillor Turner, Councillor Frost, Councillor Harker, Councillor Burgess. That motion is defeated. Councillor Frost has foreshadowed the original recommendation. So what we'll do now is we have Councillor Frost as the mover. Can we please have a seconder? Councillor Turner as the seconder. Councillor Frost, you have the right to speak if you wish as the mover, or if you choose to opt out, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
No need to. I just note that Councillor.
Who have I missed? Councillor Abbey. Sorry. Reid. Okay, sorry. Councillor Reid, sorry, this is
You voted for it. Against it.
I voted against.
Thank you, Councillor Reid against. Thank you, councillors, for keeping me honest. That recommendation, regardless, is being defeated. We now go to the foreshadowed motion. So Councillor Frost, you have moved that. We've had a seconder through Councillor Turner. Councillor Frost, you have the right to open the debate.
I think we've probably debated this enough. Councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frost. Are there any councillors who wish to speak for or against? No. I will put the recommendation. All those councillors for? All those councillors against? That is declared carried. All councillors present voting for. Could someone please bring the Mayor in? Thank you, Councillor Harker.
Gosh, that was short.
I was trying not to allow too much time on the phone, but nonetheless, here we are.
Sorry, I forgot my phone instead.
Oh,
Thank you. Right. Rushing right along. Moving to 7.2, which is Local Roads, Community and Infrastructure Grants Program. That's suggested, yes, Councillor Jones.
I'm happy to move the recommendation. I'd like to
Have a
add
seconder.
if I can add one extra point to
All right,
it
before you,
before we
get a seconder, yep.
It's my understanding that all of these will go for approval, and hopefully we get the big tick for everything. I think it's always good to have an item in reserve, an unfunded item that could receive it should any of these not be able to take place in the time span that we have the grant for. So I'd like to add to the project description a backup item, so that we've got something in our back pocket, and that would be the improvement of the alleyway beside our Memorial Hall. The alleyway is the right term to be using.
Have we got anything dollars in relation to that?
For example, if for any reason, for example, if the assessment of the Binalong playground, if that was deemed that it could go for an extra year, if there were any problems in getting that materials, because of course things have got to come from overseas and there may be delays as we're experiencing with the Murrumbidgee pipeline. I'm just thinking anything that we can do on the ground, you know, from the centre of Yass out, particularly with that, because it's seen a bit of attention of late because of its disrepair. It leaks, it's dark, it's very unattractive, and it leads to one of our key parks and to the main street. If it's added to our list, I'm sure that a costing for the improvement of, for example, the roofing to make it transparent and you know, pavers or improvements in drainage would be difficult to adjust to one of the projects, should any of these projects not get up for any reason in the timeline.
So my own question before we go for a seconder is that on our list of improvements? In what, I mean, we've gone down a list of projects here that staff are recommending. We can obviously add or change to it, but is that improvement actually on identified?
I did have a discussion with the general manager this afternoon regarding its inclusion, and there was no objection to the inclusion, but I'm unaware of the priority.
But I guess what I'm getting to is I'm concerned that it's a suggestion that you have that we again have not, nobody else has had input onto the suggestion, and we can debate it all night and try and pick some other projects that we could add to that list if you really want to go that path. I mean, that's what you're saying is you picked a project and you want to put your project up with due respect, and everyone else has just assumed that there wasn't alternatives to that. You've made an assumption that there might be, which is absolutely fine, but should we be putting 6 other projects on there if one of them falls over? That's all.
I'm unaware of
asking you, councillors.
That is the truth.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I know the Memorial Hall Committee is going to be meeting soon, and not only are they going to consider the consultation report that we recently had done, but I believe they're also going to look at some some maintenance and potential upgrade projects, and that will be discussed. So maybe the discussions of that committee might be able to provide some guidance to what priority work should be done at the Memorial Hall, but it doesn't overcome the issue of are there any other projects at any other locations that might be worthy as well.
Do you want to just send it to the whole committee to work out what they want to do first?
Back in the virtual.
All right.
You
Yeah,
don't know what you want to do. Give me some money. If there's any, but there isn't any.
Sorry, I guess my point is we have a list in front of us that we've all had time to think about. I take your point that maybe they can't get the parts structured out. We don't want to waste the government money when we take it gratefully and we want to spend every cent of it. But should we be having a conversation of if one of these doesn't go ahead, what is the next ones it should be, rather than just picking one? And I don't know that that's the right way to be doing it. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, this item was actually mentioned at the last meeting of the Memorial Hall Committee in 2018. It's taken us 2 years to consider it. Perhaps we can consider it this time round and maybe get something done, but this is not the place for it.
Extract it out. Okay, thank you. I just think it's the wrong way for us to be doing it. Again, Councillor Harker, sorry. Once the other bit's removed.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
gone.
Okay. Good try. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against it? I shall put it as it stands. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, that's everybody. Okay. 7.3, expressions of interest for community operations of recycle facility. Very sadly, nobody actually had any expressions of interest. We're just noting that for future workshop. Does anyone, can I have a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Ferry, Councillor Jones. Does anyone else wish to speak to that? All those in favour? Thank you. Moving to 7.4.
Obviously, get a footnote that comes to us sooner rather than later, because I understand that we've got money to spend on a new building, so I'd rather like to get on.
Yeah, we'll work on the upcoming schedule.
We might be able to add it to one of the 63.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Moving on. So Gundaroo Cemetery fence. Councillor Burgess.
I'll move that recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Perry. Okay, there was a bit of a conversation about adding, that's a slightly amended one, is adding to protect the headstones. I think, do you want to just check that one says? It's just really added in some words to say, to protect the headstones. It just wanted, I think there was some conversation about wanting to request clarification while we were doing it, which is reasonably obvious, but.
And through you, Madam Mayor, point 3 was also added while it was talked about in the body of the report. There are Crown Reserve improvement funds, so we're suggesting that we draw the attention of the trust to that available
actually
fund.
apply for some of those funds to addition. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else wish to speak for or against it? Councillor Frost.
Mayor, I'm quite happy with this one for Gundaroo, because I think there's but each of our cemeteries has similar problems. The cemetery that I know that has more problems with fences than any other at the moment is Downing Cemetery. And I know what the Dividing Fences Act, whatever it is, says, and that's the legal position. But the reality is that we don't protect headstones, that we don't see it as our job to protect headstones. And the provision of the fence is done by the neighbours. And so the people that actually, I won't say the people that own the headstones, because there'll be all sorts of jokes, but the people whose family is marked by those headstones are reliant on the goodwill of the neighbours to provide an effective barrier against their stock. Now, yes, they may need to do that. They may be obliged to provide that barrier. But the reality is that there is not a good way for us to ensure that those graves are properly protected, other than, and because we do not, as I understand it, have the power to build a decent fence and send the bill to the neighbour. Now, we don't have that power. We probably should have if we are to protect our cemeteries properly. And I would suggest that we do some thoughts on this. And could I just ask that staff bring to us a report that basically sets out the problems and the process that may exist if a neighbour was not to provide adequate fencing, so that we know how the system works, because I'd have to say I'm confused. And just looking at it, to me, we do not have adequate powers and to protect those headstones as we're talking about, or we may not have. And I'd like to know how that process works, because I think there are some fences that we have that do need to be upgraded, but whatever is not our responsibility, and we're not contributing to that, it is difficult for us to actually make that fence appear, make those fences appear. So we have an information section just on how the system is actually supposed to work, so that we can protect those headstones.
Just for clarification, is the Dividing Fences Act is actually an act of Parliament? That's right. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to change the Act of Parliament.
No. There are some procedures under the Dividing Fences Act if there are disputes between neighbours, and there's mechanisms to resolve those, but they don't involve the council being the arbiter in those circumstances. Yeah. But we can get some advice and we can provide it to you.
Madam Mayor, for the purposes of discussion, I completely understand where Councillor Frost is coming from, but I'd like to echo point 3. There is a trust. That trust is responsible for this land on behalf of the Crown. There is a Crown Reserves Improvement Fund that is advertised, that is advertised on many different resources. It's the responsibility of the trust to seek out those funds. It's the responsibility of the trust to maintain the land that they're responsible for. Judging by the complaints from residents, judging by the concerns that we've heard, this doesn't appear to be occurring. And I think that's why point 3 is in there, that the people who are responsible should be held responsible and go out and seek the funding and be responsible for their land that they look after.
Thank you. Okay, so we have an motion in front of us. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving on to 8.1, sorry, investment environment report. Recommendation that has been prepared and it's for noting. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Turner, Councillor Furry. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Moving to councillor fees. I think it's a pretty plain sailing. Anybody would like to move that? Councillor Jones, Councillor, everyone's got their hands up. Councillor Harker, yes, you can speak to it. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's quite self-explanatory.
Firstly, I think it's really important that we don't push this through without debate. I think it's important that we talk to this issue since it's about how we pay ourselves. I think no increase is an appropriate response to adopt. And I also note that this might be the final lap year of honour for many of the councillors around this table. And these are uncertain times, and we may have the job of attracting more than half of our numbers around this table at the next election. And I think it's important that during uncertain times, where people are working harder to make ends meet, they might be doing extra duties during lockdowns, such as homeschooling children or working from home as well, where at times when things like childcare is very difficult to get in those circumstances, and that might include, expending money with family instead, which you can't recoup through the processes. I think it's important that we don't undermine the very small payment that councillors get, knowing that in about a year we've got to attract the very best of our community to put their hands up and add their enthusiasm, add their energy, add their professional skills to the team that we want to see lead us into 2022. So I think it's an appropriate response to refreeze it, which is what's happening in other workplaces. But I also think it's important that we don't take a cut that could put us in a situation where we don't attract people where they think that's not enough for me to step up to the job. I also think that it's very prudent that we look to changing our status and apply for the next possible opportunity to change us to regional rural. We're a community that's going to welcome eventually 13,000 people on our border, let alone the increase in Murray Bateman and Yass, which is happening now. I think we're targeted to get to 21,000 people by 2031 from memory. So that's a lot of people, and it's certainly around the threshold for that new category of regional rural.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to 8.3, there's a debt write-off. There's a recommendation in front of you. I think looking at that all avenues have been followed up for as long as humanly possible, and spending any more councillor staff or legal time on it is not to the benefit of our ratepayers. So if I could have someone who would like to move and second that recommendation, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Frost, Councillor Jones.
Happy to. I also have a question. I'm not sure if we've got Mark on the screen behind us. Or...
No.
No, we don't.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, he's...
Okay, so my question, Madam Mayor, through you, is in regards to why the length of time between the decision to actually finally write this debt off, like what's normal procedure? So I don't really understand the process around that.
Look, like with all procedures, we should always be constantly review them, and certainly this is one that we haven't done for some time, but there is quite an exhaustive process that you need to go through to demonstrate that you've tried every possible option to recoup the debt. As you can see through this, we have gone through that process. It has taken some time to do it. I suspect that there will be others as well, but certainly it's one of the things that we've talked to our finance team, is that we need to look at our debt recovery procedures and making sure that they're up to scratch.
So through you, Madam Mayor, what's considered our internal benchmark for addressing an issue like this? Because this debt was incurred in 2011.
From my perspective, it's if the cost of recouping the money far outweighs the amount that's outstanding, I think you've gone past that mark.
Okay, so I have a mover and seconder. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Moving to a notice of motion from Councillor Jones. Seconded Councillor Ferry. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah. So the motion is that a report be presented to the August meeting on the options for the installation of safety barriers in the vicinity of Fitzroy Street and Burley Griffin Way, Bynalong, and the potential source of funding.
Sorry,
was there a question?
No, that was Councillor Jones.
Okay, sorry.
Councillor McManus talking under his breath. I do apologise. For Councillor McManus's.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So I already have a seconder. I'd just like to say that I'd like to thank staff for their response over the last week. This has been the proverbial frog in water for a very long time, through channels that were with no teeth to do much about. I have seen our community in Bynalong, and also myself as chair of the local traffic committee, our frustration levels have just risen and risen and risen. Every opportunity that we've had through the local traffic committee, we have pushed the list that the community have wanted to address. And we've gotten so far each time in terms of, yes, some cat's eyes on the road, yes, some reducing the speed limit, and some signage. But the issue of barriers was always a no-go for our RMS, and which is now TF in New South Wales. So to push them to do this, we've hit a barrier, sorry to use the pun, every single time. And I want to note what the residents have said about the way that traffic responds in those accidents. Sometimes it's leaving from Fitzroy Street and sometimes it's Burley Griffin Way, which is why we put this option forward to create a barrier on council-owned land. Even though it's at the bottom of the incline, so the cars have already picked up speed, ideally the barrier should be on Burley Griffin, but it would not be without merit to actually put it in front of the house should a vehicle leave from Fitzroy Street, which it has done before. Certainly getting it on the Burley Griffin Way, you're going to get it before it reaches that increased speed, which is what the engineers have talked to me about. One of the questions that was raised is why can't they have the water barriers? Now, I was told over the phone that only stops a 50-kilometre accident, but it's worth asking the question in this room, would there be any harm in putting that in as an interim measure while we do this process?
I'd have to take that on notice, because obviously we need to talk to, Transport for New South Wales. We've got to figure out where those, if we put water barriers in, where they would go.
Okay, fair enough. And just noting that even if we do come up with A, budget, and B, the plan, we still need concurrence from TF New South Wales to actually install it. Is that correct?
Yep, install
Okay.
barriers.
Okay, so we've tried to make it as broad as possible so that a barrier somewhere can be installed at some point by someone, And I look with optimism on the fact that there's someone new in charge.
You, yes.
So
Someone who may actually listen to us, we understand.
I wish you every success.
Councillor Harker, you second? No, you want to speak? Yes, sorry, and then Councillor McManus.
I just want to ask a question I think that Councillor Jones touched on, which was that we may need permission to put in a barrier even on council road, so we can't tomorrow go out and actually put one of those water barriers out. Is that the process? So if we own the road, I suppose they're asking for some immediate action given that there's an accident every month and it's something that we detect. Do we have control over that process?
No, we don't have control of that road. That is a state road.
Burley Griffin.
Yeah,
I
Burley
think you
Griffin
took
is a
that
state
Yeah,
road.
until that feature, so
Which
the
is-
council road.
You still have problems because it's in the vicinity of a regional road. So you still just because it's not on the road
Yes.
that's state controlled, because it's in proximity of the road, you still need to engage with RMS.
Even on the footpath.
Okay.
It's like if you had a subdivision against a road, but the access to your subdivision was coming off a side road. You still have to engage with RMS. It's the way the road classification system works about who's responsible for what. And there's lots of problems, as we know on the Hume Highway, for instance. The black stuff is RMS and the green stuff or the brown stuff on the side of the road is council. Now,
What I was looking for in that comment was appreciate you trying to do it the right way and bring a report back, but is there anything we can do in the interim immediately in terms of say, we want to install these on the council road and get consent to do that, like while we're waiting to do the full report? Are there any steps we can do to sort of support these guys in their safety concerns and reduce the potential, even if it stops at 50k, it would be significantly better than what they have now. So I'm trying to see if there's any interim measures we can take that are illegal and effective while we try and push for that longer term solution with hopefully a more receptive.
Speak camera.
I think you've got to talk to the RMS because if you do something that turns out that is not supported by RMS, you may actually be liable.
I respect that.
And that's the risk we've got at the present time. So yes, while I understand the motives for doing something and wanting to do something, if we do that and some unfortunate accident happens and RMS are not there in our corner, we end up wearing the liability for all of that. So we need to be very cautious about that. That's why it's important to have that meeting with the RMS.
But so that was my, could we not confer with them, saying while we are looking at the longer term or permanent solution, we have a temporary solution we'd like to implement. Can we please have your consent?
Well, that's why we've already put the request in for the meeting with RMS.
Okay.
So that's already going. So we will certainly be raising both interim solutions and where those and some long-term solutions.
So you're effectively already taking that step.
We've already in anticipation of this, we've already put the request through for the meeting. Just that there's been a change of personnel from what we understand, so we've now got to get to the new person.
Lindsay, who's presented to us before, has a new boss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, Michael, Councillor McManus.
I certainly heard loud and clear the need for barriers and if possible a 24-hour speed camera. But speed cameras only actually catch people. They don't necessarily stop your car. It's car accidents. But there was one other point there, and I think we can probably achieve something. All the road signs that are up there, or were up there, with the approval of the RMS. So if we actually
replacement signs are okay.
So if we actually had a policy, or in the interim, that we replaced all signs that were knocked down within 7 days, that may help us manage it in the interim. Because Councillor Jones has given us an opportunity to discuss with the RMS and get a decent long-term solution. But what I was mumbling before was if we were to have a ruling or a direction from council that in that vicinity of Bynalong, between Fitzroy Street and the highway, that any sign that's knocked over is replaced within 7 days. I just wanted, what I was trying to find out, would that be too onerous on staff?
There's a, which I was going to include in the report, that sign with the 7-tonne limit that was knocked down is actually that 7-tonne limit doesn't apply anymore.
Doesn't we say it does?
No.
No, the actual bridge was strengthened about 10 years ago, and the signs weren't removed. So that's what we've now discovered, that the sign shouldn't have been
B
there,
doubles can actually.
and therefore it doesn't have a load limit.
But it wouldn't be a B double route.
No, it's definitely not a B double route. It can't. B doubles have only got certain routes that they can take on roads, and that's not a B double. Sometimes people look at a truck and a trailer and think it's a B double, but it's not a B double. It's got a fixed fixed cab and a.
Certainly,
That road we could declare not suitable for heavy vehicles because that's our road.
you need to have reasons to put a load limit on a road. A B double can't go, even on a load limit road, a local road, they cannot go off the route that they've been permitted to travel on. If they do, that can be a matter straight to RMS and the police.
You've got to catch
I think the conversation though
But they
was
can
that
track-
there are
yeah.
other trucks and things now using that road because of that load limit sign. And maybe not B doubles, but is there some way to stop trucks using those roads, which are, they're not really appropriate to be using internal roads in Bynalong, big trucks? So that's my question.
Which is ends up being the second one, Madam Mayor, because my first one is, can we just have a policy that says we reinstate any sign that gets knocked over in that section of Bynalong within 7 days?
I don't think you need a policy. I think that just should be something that we just do as a matter of course. If we get a report of a sign being taken out, a traffic management sign, we should be looking at replacing that as a
Except that they found that the sign shouldn't have been there.
Well, in this case, the signs in relation to the load limit shouldn't be there.
Shouldn't have been there.
In relation to signs that are speed signs or
Those,
advisory signs,
yes, they need to be replaced.
they need to be replaced, and they should be replaced as soon as we become aware that they've been taken out.
We get notified of every accident.
We get some notification of every accident, but we don't necessarily get notification of any property damage that's done. Sometimes we have to go and have a look at that. Or it comes through as a report from a resident to say that the sign's been taken out. Obviously, that's happened in this case, and it looks like that's fallen through the cracks, and we need to make sure that we are better at responding to those sort of search requests that we get.
Sorry, Councillor Ferry is next. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to raise or highlight a bit of a comment that this is something that we've worked through for nearly 2 years, and it's very hard to fight when your hands are tied. And I think that our community knows that, and I know during open forum that passion came out from those residents in particular. But I for one, and I'm sure other councillors realise as well, that in receiving what has been some horrific photos of property damage, some horrific photos of how close it's come to people's homes. I remember one incident where, for example, it was literally meters away from the room of a newborn child. It is very horrific. It is very concerning. But the other thing we didn't have 2 years ago, which I think that residents and watching this will appreciate, is that we are well and truly trying to fight for this issue. And with live streaming now in place, which it wasn't 2 years ago, they can see that, they can hear that, they can understand that. The fact that there was a feeling before that maybe they were being ignored, I don't think is there anymore. And certainly one of the people who spoke on the forum this evening, in fact, just sent me a message before saying, regardless of what happens, we really respect and appreciate the fact that all councillors, including the mayor and the deputy, are trying to take this fight as far and as hard as they can. So I just wanted to note that.
Okay, thank you.
more question
Yes.
to the director, if
Now,
that's
so,
possible. Oh, sorry,
so
go, go,
Councillor
go.
Burgess
Go,
and
go.
Councillor Jones.
Look, you were talking about the trucks there and B doubles guns. Can't they get permission to go on some of the roads, permits to get on the road, BWs?
B doubles do require a permit
Yeah,
to go
get
on a
into
particular
some
road,
places.
but they get that through the RMS.
Yeah,
But there are, to my knowledge, there are no B double routes other than Billy Griffin Way.
yeah.
But they can get a permit
through-
to deliver stuff to somebody's
Yeah,
property.
Yeah.
That's all.
But certainly, I think it's a fair point that people do get confused. Sometimes they see a truck and a dog
Yes.
and they think it's a B double, and it's not.
Councillor Jones.
So I've got two questions. Firstly, for the director, what signs, really don't care what they look like, what signs can we put up that traffic safety signs within the next week to replace it, so it gives some indication to drivers, oh, there's something I need to slow down for. And secondly, how do we discourage trucks from using that particular route? What signage can we put up that's legal? Because it sounds to me like this is a very old bridge, and while the weight of these trucks may not be the issue, it's the number of trucks that are now using that because of the low limits being removed.
I think you need to put that should be part of the report. If you have an existing sign that's been approved, if you've got an existing sign that's been approved, you can maintain those signs by replacing them if they wear out or if they're removed or they're damaged. That's pretty standard. But to put another sign up or a different type of sign, we have limited ability to do that. We don't, even on our roads. So for instance, we can't put a speed sign up. That has to be dealt with by through RMS. So we've got some constraints about what we can and can't do in those road reserves. So I think that certainly if we can get the meeting with the RMS, look at both the short and the longer term solutions, and come back and say these are the options for us, and this is what we can do, and these are the signs that we can put up, and these are the barriers we can put up, or these are the guardrails we can put up. That needs to come back as part of the package.
In the interim, is it possible to redirect one of our flashing light signs with slow down? Are we allowed to park that in our road?
We can look at that. Yeah, we can certainly look at that. I'm again, it may be that we just need to advise the RMS of that, but we can look at those signs, yes.
I really appreciate it if it suddenly broke down about there and couldn't be moved for a couple of weeks. We've got 4 of those variable message boards, and
we have been using them for some local messaging here, but there's no reason why we can't take them out to somewhere like that. So we'll have a look at that tomorrow.
So do I need to include in the motion the call for information regarding what signage can go up?
That's
I think
we're saying
take
it's
that
very
as part of the report. I think also taking into account, there's some rhetoric about some trucks. It just may be a question of how many actual trucks, whether it's just some rumbling through and where they're coming from, because there are farms and things on the other side of that too. So, Councillor Frost not on silent.
Enjoy the little England.
Well, I did a ditty myself. Okay, all right. I think we're done. So, Councillor Frost, you've got. Yes, all right.
Thank you. I mean, could I just support the motion? Could I also ask that we look at the full gamut of things that we might be able to do? I was a bit concerned here that the discussion suggested that we might pull up short of something that left us with some sort of liability because we might do something that wasn't okayed by some other government department. We're not talking about things that don't matter here. We're talking about protecting the lives of some people that live on this corner. And to be honest, if we put something up there and we get sued, but the kid's still alive, I'm more than happy to take that risk. And if it means we put stuff up there and we have to use that to embarrass a state government department into doing the right thing, then that's an option too. And can we have, as the motion says, all the options that we have for actually doing this? Because the nice way doesn't seem to have worked. And it's not just a political battle. It's not just something that's, that'd be nice to have. This is something that is really, really important because we don't know when. And I say we don't know when, but we know that if nothing's done, it will happen. There is going to be a truck or there's going to be a vehicle that'll go through and go onto the property of the people that spoke to us tonight. So let's not be too careful about legal liabilities and all those sort of things. Let's have a look and let us consider all the things that we might be able to do.
Okay, thank you. On that note, I'll move the motion as it's moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone. Moving along to questions with notes from Councillor Frost. I think there's been answers to your questions, Councillor Frost.
Yes,
So it's
Madam Mayor.
basically
Could I move
noting.
that the questions and the answers be noted?
Thank you. Can I have a second for noting? Thank you, Councillor Ferry.
So I just quickly speak to it. Could I just make a couple of comments about each of these points? Thank you for the report on the meeting at the Liberty Theatre. I just noted that it was the General Manager who met with Mr. Brennan, which was excellent. It's not actually noted in the report, but that's excellent. It's nice to have some clarity on what's going on with the commercial hotel, as sad as that news might be. And can I just go to, I'm concerned about, we seem to have problems with the software and not being able to keep these figures up. And it makes me wonder how we actually manage these things if we haven't been getting this information coming through. And I'm sort of, I guess the follow-up question to that is, when are we going to have some figures about how long it takes? And I'll take up individual cases with the director in due course, but we need to have that information because it's really our efficiency. That's what tells us how efficient this particular part of the organisation is. And we haven't had that information for a long, long, long time. We used to have it quite easily. And finally, I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed with the answer to the last question, which is what we've done beside about COVID. Because we've done everything that we've been asked to do by the state government, and that's just as we would expect. But I always thought this was a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, a chance for council staff to tell us all the extra things that we might have done that were making life easier for our citizens. And we didn't get any of that. And it's a bit unfortunate when you ask a Dorothy Dixer and you don't get an answer. But let me say, I think it's a chance for us to look at that and say, well, maybe we should be doing some different things. And just a couple of things that we might think about. At the moment, it's very difficult around this town, and I suspect in the other villages as well, to find a meeting room that's big enough to be able to meet the code standards. Because the Soldiers Club, which has been done that job traditionally for very, very well for a long time, finds that they need the space for other purposes, and it's more difficult now for people to have meetings. So maybe we can use the Memorial Hall, and I'll ask the Memorial Hall Committee about that, and maybe they'll bring back to the next meeting some proposals about how we as a council might be able to improve the amount of meeting spaces. The second question, and it's almost a question, but maybe somebody can tell me at some stage, whether our health staff are actually wandering around to the various businesses and helping them, not an enforcement, but helping them to work out how they can easier and better comply with the COVID standards and what we need to do to keep the community staff.
When you say our health staff,
yeah.
Whose health staff?
Yes. Okay.
We don't have any health staff.
We have
Food and safety.
food and safety.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Inspections.
Our inspection staff. These are people that know about that sort of stuff and should be able to assist. I just wondered whether or not we've been doing that. We probably have, I would hope. If not, then perhaps we ought to think about how we might be able to do that, because there are things that we can be doing that are not necessarily dictated by the state government. If we don't think them, then you ask, what are we doing here? Why do we have a local government if the only things we ever do is what's dictated from from the New South Wales government. And I'm sure that that's not what we all think we're here for. So perhaps we can think about some of those things and maybe suggest to staff ways that we may be able to make life easier in what is a pretty difficult time. So thank you for the answers. They're excellent. Okay. And
just on a couple of those points, yes, our health staff do, as part of their food shop inspections, talk to people about COVID-19. That has actually came through as a state government directive to local governments. So that's already happening. Our meeting halls are also governed by the restrictions put in place by the public health orders. We are limited in where we can. We've actually reopened our halls for bookings, meeting those COVID requirements. But one of the requirements of anybody having a meeting is they have to have their COVID safety plan. That's a requirement for them to do. We can't do. We can prepare a plan for any meeting we have, which we do. But if a community group wants to use a facility, they have to have their own COVID meeting plan. It's about how they manage the space that they're in. So those things are all there. We publish on our website. We update it quite regularly. We haven't updated it for a little while because not all the changes that have come through in the last little while have all been about border crossings. They're not related to council operations at this stage, but we do have a comprehensive list on our website about what services are in place and what adjustments we've been making to them. So we are doing all of those things at an operational level, and we're publicising that as soon as we make any changes. So we are doing all of those things. Certainly, we're trying to communicate that as best we can through all of our media channels to get the message out there. But I can tell you now, there's a whole heap of confusion out there at the present time about what people can and can't do in those areas. I certainly know, in my experience, trying to make a booking for a meeting room at a club. They don't want to have their meeting rooms open for the simple reason they want to maximise the number of customers in their bar space. Very, very simple. So that does put some pressure on alternate community facilities. I know that many community groups are also looking at alternate ways of meetings. They're doing Zoom meetings just like we do a lot of the time. So it is an ever-changing feast. And as I said, as an executive team, we're meeting every single Monday morning, working through the latest requirements and trying to make adjustments to the way we operate.
Yep. Councillor, just a quick comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The General Manager has stolen a lot of my thunder, and it always is a great concern to me when our executive team have to defend themselves. I actually think that point 5, referring to the ease of impact of COVID-19 restrictions and how councils address that, has actually been good. The first thing that we did as councillors 3 months ago at the onset of this was met after our meeting and said, what steps do we need to take to best support our community? And then we talked about those steps. We talked with the staff who were in the meeting room as well. And we talked about how do we best effectively communicate changes related to COVID-19 and what support's available. Finally, as noted by this last dot point, for organisations and individuals having difficulties meeting payment of council fees and charges, a hardship policy has been developed. That is yet another thing that came out of that discussion. So as an organisation, I think we actually, in fact, have been quite responsive. As an organisation, from this point now to when I first started as a councillor nearly 4 years ago, the whole demeanour has changed around how we actually talk to the community, how this council uses social media, both in communicating and receiving communication from our community. So if we want to have a bit of a time machine here, I think we're doing a lot better than some councils out there, and I think we're doing a lot better than what we were doing almost 4 years ago. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think if we were just noting it, I have a mover and seconder, Councillor. It's actually questions with notice, and the questions have actually been asked and answered. So I think we don't probably needing to be debating this too much. Councillor,
I could just close the debate. And I only just make one point. I didn't think that anybody would have to defend themselves, because it was a question about what was there, and I've got a few suggestions about other additional things that we are. And wasn't an attack on council staff at all, and it's improper of the Councillor Furry to pretend that it was. It wasn't an attack on council staff. It was simply an opportunity. And as I say, I thought that maybe some of the things that Councillor Furry was talking about may have come through in the answer, because I think this is an opportunity. This is an
Can-
opportunity
can
for
we-
people to say.
Okay, thank you. We'll put the notice to be noted. Thank you very much. All those in favour noting? Anybody not? Thank you. We still have one more item left to go. 12.2 minutes of the Local Emergency Management Committee and Rescue Committee meetings of an uncertain date, 7th of July. There we go, I found it in time. Could I have a mover and second of that? Thank you. Councillor Harker, Councillor Ferry, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to that? Yes.
There's a note there about
What page are you on?
Transport for New South Wales. It's page 73 of 75. And it's heading right at the bottom of the page, so Fagan Drive, Bookham. Now, I'm assuming that this is a reference, and I don't, it doesn't make complete sense, but I'm assuming this is a reference to the proposal to change the way people enter and come out of Bookham. And I presume that's what it is. In which case, could I just ask councillors to seek further advice from the General Manager on the provision of submission from Council and MC? Could I just ask the General Manager whether what are we making a submission and what that submission is likely to be?
I was simply, well, certainly I've had a briefing that community consultation was underway by the RMS in relation to changes proposed at Bookham. And certainly the comment that I made to the RMS was that they certainly need to engage with the local community about the alterations that they're proposing, and they need to work through those and take those issues on board. So that's the representations I've made directly in a briefing session that I did have probably about a fortnight ago. I was certainly approached by a couple of representatives from the Emergency Management Committee in regards to the concerns that have been expressed to them, particularly by, I think it was Volunteer Rescue Association, I think, that raised the issue. And my response was that yes, we have raised the concern, we have raised the issues with the RMS, and they need to make their representations as well directly to the RMS about their particular concerns in that area. So we have limited influence over the state highway. We can certainly national, yeah, federal, yeah, but we certainly have very limited ability to influence. We can certainly advocate, and we can certainly put forward issues, and certainly that's what's been done to date. What the RMS has done with those representations, I'm unsure of at this stage. They haven't come back to us.
So, let's follow up quickly. There was a proposal which basically made it all left turns, and there was very little in terms of additional work, and particularly of lanes that may allow people to merge into traffic and things like that. And it made it very complicated for people to get into Bookham and then out again, to the extent where I think most people would bypass Bookham and keep going. We haven't made a comment that positive or negative about that particular proposal, and do we intend to?
Well, we haven't got the proposal. All I've got is a briefing session with the regional manager. That's all.
Okay, so you haven't seen the one sheet of paper, and it seems that it is a bit limited on the ground, that sheet of paper.
Well, they again, as I understand it, what they're doing is they're doing their preliminary consultation about their design proposal for their road. That's part of their process is that they engage with the community, find out what the community is at, and they'll either make adjustments or they will not make adjustments depending on what they're.
When it becomes a bit more substantive and there's a full proposal, can we have our engineers look at it and provide their input?
Yeah, our engineers are involved in discussions with the RMS on this issue. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that being the case, councillors, I will close the meeting at looks like just after 6. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get us all to acknowledge the all those in favour of those minutes. Sorry, that was done. Thank you. That's everyone.